Welcome to Called to Homeschool with your host, Meg Thomas. I am a mother of 7 with 5 homeschool graduates. Each week, we'll talk about real life homeschool, mindset shifts, and practical tools you can use in your home. Because homeschooling isn't just about school, it's about restoring the family. Hello, welcome back to Called to Homeschool. Excited to be here. Just a quick reminder that all month long, I am doing the homeschool boot camp at 20% off to say, let's get ready for school. Let's make it awesome because we want to build a family, not just a school. And I've seen that people who can homeschool long term, they build a family and they work on that piece, and that makes homeschool just fun. And so you can go over to www.coachmegthomas.com and Homeschool Bootcamp, use the code HAPPY and get 20% off, and you get all my videos, all my printables, anything I add in the future, you'll get. The no yelling course, all those amazing things are in there. And so helping you to grow, become the amazing person you are, and also to help your children, like your family, to run smoothly. So homeschool just gets to be fun. So I invite you to go and check that out. Okay, we are diving into a question today. And this one comes from Mayanna from Utah. And she said, you talk a lot about living books, and I love that concept. And rather than trying to learn from a textbook, I'm wondering if you can share a list of some of your favorite living books. I have young kids, so I won't be using it for them for a while, but I want to read some living books myself. I've read some Kristen Hanna books and feel like I've learned more about those historical time periods from those books than any high school or college class or textbook. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to talk about books today, and I'm excited. So let's dive in. So first of all, I wanted to say what a living book is and where that term came from. And in case you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So Charlotte Mason is who we often give credit for the term of living books. And Charlotte Mason was a British educator who lived from 1842 to 1923. She believed that children are whole people, not empty buckets waiting to be filled with facts. Instead of simply memorizing information, she wanted children to develop a genuine love of learning and to build relationships with the ideas, people, and the world around them. One of her most famous quotes is, "Education is an atmosphere, a discipline, a life." And I love that because it reminds us that education isn't just what happens at a desk between 9 to 3. It's happening in our homes, through our conversations, our habits, the books we read, the places we explore, and the lives we live together. So, love Charlotte Mason. She's great. So now let's talk about living books. A living book is a book that is written by someone who most likely is very passionate about the subject. It draws you in and it tells a story. It paints pictures with words and it makes you care. Instead of giving children a list of facts to memorize, a living book invites them into an experience. For example, if you're learning about George Washington, a textbook might say, George Washington was the first president of the United States. He served from 1789 to 1797 and is often called the father of this country. Great, facts are important, but they don't necessarily spark curiosity. A living book, on the other hand, might tell a story of young George Washington, surveying the wilderness as a teenager, the difficult winter his soldiers endured at Valley Forge, or the remarkable moment when he chose to step down from power instead of becoming a lifelong ruler. Suddenly, George Washington just isn't a name and a list of dates. He's a real person with courage, struggles, and character. That's the difference. A living book helps children connect with people and ideas, not just memorize facts. Now, facts are important, and I love facts. I've even bought books before about facts and dumb facts to know, but they don't spark our curiosity or a child's curiosity, right? And a living book does. So the same goes for not only for history, but for science. A textbook may define the water cycle. A living book may tell the story of a tiny raindrop traveling from the ocean into the clouds, falling on a mountain, winding through rivers, and eventually returning to the sea. Children remember stories because stories connect with our hearts as well as our minds. Now, does that mean textbooks are bad? No, not at all. Textbooks have their place. They can organize information well and can be helpful in subjects like math or grammar, or as students move into higher level academics. But many homeschool families choose living books because they help children to fall in love with learning rather than simply complete assignments. And it's been interesting to make, as I have really implemented more and more living books into my homeschool, my children are more and more excited to read and learn about things because the books are a lot more interesting. One of the beautiful things also about living books is that they naturally lead to a conversation. So after reading a chapter together, or even a child reading alone, you can ask questions. So instead of a quiz or write an essay about it of 20 comprehension questions, you could just tell me, what do you remember? Charlotte Mason calls this narration, and it is something I have practiced for years, and I still practice it. But it is the practice of having children tell back what they have heard or read in their own words. Narrations encourage careful listening, attention, comprehension, and communication, all without requiring a worksheet. So for me, my children, I always have a notebook for them, and they are welcome to write a sentence, a paragraph or two, draw pictures. Some of my kids have done a one-page picture. Some of them have done comic strips. One of them even made movies with them. The only thing I found I don't do is that you can't just come and tell me. You have to write it down, put it down somewhere, make a picture, whatever it is, make your movie, and then we talk about it the next day during our Minute with Mom. And especially now that I don't have littles, I try to pre-read as many of the books as I can, or reading it right there with them, because then it just makes our conversation so much more interesting. Like, what did you think about this part? Like, I didn't see that coming. Did you see that coming? And I really enjoyed doing that. Living books also tend to stay with us. And it was fun as I even was creating this list of some of the living books I've enjoyed. I could just think about the book of how it inspired me, or information I knew, or how I really learned to care about somebody or a type of people in a different way, just because of the way that the story stayed with me. And you can think about that if you read a lot, maybe books that you remember from your childhood. Chances are, it wasn't a textbook. They were stories that made you laugh or cry, wonder, or imagine. Those are living books. And it was living books that really helped me to find my passion for learning. I did not like history in public school, which is funny because that's probably my favorite subject now. And now I go out of my way to study a place, especially before I travel there, or if we're doing something for school. I love to go and I learn about the people and the culture and so many different things. And living books help me do that. And they help my children to learn and love about a people, a culture. And so I am excited to share some of the living books that I've really enjoyed over the years. And it was hard to narrow it down, so I will do my best. So here are some to add to your own list if you would like to add some more living books into your library or something you want to read. All right, so the first couple are from World War II periods. And the first one is The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. Absolutely inspiring book. Corrie ten Boom was from the Netherlands, and she was during World War II, and the Nazis had invaded their country, and she's actually a Christian, but obviously saw what they were doing to the Jews was wrong. And so The Hiding Place was a place where they would hide Jews. And so her amazing story of faith and courage, absolutely beautiful book. The next one is Unbroken. So I have found there are two versions of Unbroken, and there is an adult one and a youth one. So make sure if your youth is reading it, I would do the youth one. But this is a beautiful story also during World War II, and it takes place in the Pacific, where his plane goes down into the Pacific Ocean and they get picked up by the Japanese and put into a prisoner of war camp. So not only is the book beautiful, but I think the movie is just as beautiful and so inspiring. So my kids and I read the book and then we watched the movie, and it was just to overcome adversity, to push through when things are hard. Just absolutely beautiful story. The next one was recommended to me by a client and friend, is Beneath a Scarlet Sky. And this one takes place during World War II in Italy. And oh my goodness, this one is a powerful one, just absolutely beautiful. There's so many things. It was under Mussolini, right, in Italy, and during that regime, and playing the game of wanting to help people, but also not wanting to get shipped off to the front lines because Italy was on the same side as Germany, right? And so many things that went into that. Absolutely beautiful, life-changing book. So awesome. And then if you remember last year, I got the opportunity to go over to Austria and Hungary with my daughter, and somebody was like, well, you've got to read about Empress Sissy. And I thought, who the heck is Empress Sissy? And so I found a book called The Accidental Empress, and it was her story. And it's so interesting of on paper, if you just read her story, she was born here, married here, had a kid here, or did whatever, it's kind of boring. But when you get to know the person, and they took so it's a historical fiction, right? But they took a lot of journal entries and a lot of different things with her, and of just what it was like to be an empress. and some of her thoughts and some of her ways. This is during the Austrian Empire, which becomes the Austro-Hungarian Empire, right? And a lot of things she did. And then I got to go to her museum and see her house and do all of these cool things. And it was so fun when I got there because I'm like, I know who this is. And in Hungary, she loved the Hungarians. And there was a statue of this guy in Hungary. And I was like, hey, isn't that the guy that people suspect maybe she had an affair with? And he was like, what? How do you know this? It's like, they don't know for sure, but like a lot of people assume. And it was just really fun to read that book. And get to know her, especially before I went over there. This next series, The Work and the Glory, is a series about the Mormon pioneers coming across the United States. I love this series. I've had all my big kids read this series, and whatever faith you are, this is a really beautiful one of their trials and their struggles coming across the plains and persecution they had. So really powerful series. This next is just an author, and she has books that are just normal writing books, and she's a good author, but she also has a lot of great historical fiction ones. And these ones are geared more towards teens, but I've still read them all and I enjoyed all of them. So she has Resistance, which is a Jewish girl joins the Polish resistance during World War II. She has Rescue, set in a Nazi-occupied France, following a girl trying to survive and help others. Words on Fire, and this is in Lithuania when the Russian Empire outlawed the Lithuanian language. So a fascinating story that many people have never heard. And a little tangent with this one is there are like more and more stories are coming out about like people underneath Russia's regime. And I think maybe because World War II had ended so quickly that people got their stories out, but Russia, people really got oppressed and whatnot. So a lot of stories didn't get out, but it is called Between Shades of Gray, a really powerful story of somebody and their experience in Russia. Absolutely beautiful book. But back to Jennifer A. Nelson. She has Lines of Courage. That is during World War I and 4 interconnected stories from World War I. She also has, and I didn't write it down, and I wanted to say it's A Night Divided, and that is when the Berlin Wall came up and the stories with that. And then Iceberg is another one that she has, and that is about the Titanic. So it was really fun. I've read all of those books, obviously, and all of the World War II books and whatnot. And then I got to go over to Germany. And my brother was currently living in Berlin at the time. And so he took me to see a lot of these places and experience the wall and see the wall, go to where the Stasi's were, just so many things. And then it's crazy because you have the part of Berlin that was not occupied by Russia and how buildings were thriving and growing. And then you had the part that was occupied by Russia and it was all gray and all the communism. And so it's really interesting to go and experience and understanding some people, even in Eastern Europe, that were behind the Iron Curtain, right? Of like what it did to their spirit and to understand their culture and where they're coming from. So I love reading these and then traveling and going and seeing a lot of these places, as many as I can and as many as my husband and our budget will allow. Also, another great one that was awesome. I've read a couple about North Korea escapees, but one that really stuck with me is by Yeonmi Park. And her first book is about her escape from North Korea, and it's pretty intense and what she has to go through in order to get to America. Her second book is more about watching out for some of the things that she's seeing creep into the U.S. They are things practiced in North Korea. So a really great book. I've read some great ones about Vietnam escapees, and I don't know why I forgot to write the titles down, but I totally can help you if you, I can Google that later. But with that, as you're getting started, or anybody is, and you are wanting more living books, a really easy way to do this is if I usually pick an area I want to learn about, maybe something that's like piqued my interest. If you don't know, like Well Educated Heart just has a rotation schedule, and you're like, I can just follow their schedule and then kind of pick my own or do some of the ones they do. But you can utilize just a Google search or AI and just ask something like living books about Vietnam, inspiring books, historical fictions, appropriate for teens or something. Like I've Googled and AI'd all sorts of those things to find a lot of these books. And so I put in a place I want to know more about. I look for books. Like lots of times I love to look up their legends, their folk tales, historical fictions or nonfiction books. I had the opportunity to go to New Zealand recently. And so I was trying to find books there. And it's always sad to me when a culture doesn't write a lot of books. And so I know a lot of Polynesian cultures, their stories were told, they were just told, right? And they didn't get written down. But there I did find one that was Oh my gosh, I just forgot it. The Whale Rider. And I think there's a movie about it too. I want to say that's what it's called. But Whale Surfer, Whale Rider, now I can't remember. But so I heard and read that one before I went over there and even looked up Maori words and just like I loved that experience of getting to know a people and a culture. Another great author for nonfiction books is Albert Marin. And he has one on Hitler and Stalin. And they're so great to understand and read about these tyrants and how they became the way they were, right? And experiences they went through and how they became such the people that they became. He also has stuff about America and Vietnam, Mao Zedong and his China. And with China, you have the Red Scarf Girl, which is great. And also, I want to say it's called White Swans, where it is the story of a grandmother, a mother, and the daughter, and their story of living through China with Mao Zedong. So many inspiring things with that. So I think one of the biggest things I've learned over the years is that I want my children to love learning, and living books is a really great way to do that because you just start to fall in love with the people or have empathy for a people or a culture and just understanding even. But it has opened up my love for learning as well. And what's awesome is when it opens up your own love for learning, children notice what excites us too. And they see the books we pick up, the places we're curious about, and the conversations we have around the dinner table. When we were studying about World War I and World War II, my daughter and I were reading a bunch of the books off these lists and many more. And we were loving it and enjoying it. And it was interesting because then my son was like, well, I want to read these too. And I was not going to make it be part of his school. I was going to have simpler books and maybe more picture book style. And he was like, no, I want to read what you guys are reading because it seems like you really like it. And he really enjoyed them as well. Living books have changed the way I see education because they remind me that history is not boring and not just a list of names and dates, which I inevitably would forget anyway, but it's people, it's stories and their ideas. And it's when we connect with those things, learning becomes a whole lot more meaningful. So whether you are homeschooling a young child, a high schooler, anything in between, or whether you're just looking for a next great read. I hope that you will pick up some living books for yourself or for your kids. Follow your curiosity, follow their curiosity, learn about a person, a place, or a time period you've always wondered about. You may be surprised how much one good book can spark a lifelong interest. Friends, thanks so much for being here today and for listening, and I will talk to you next week. Struggling in your homeschool? You don't have to. Check out the Homeschool Bootcamp at CoachMegThomas.com. Thanks so much for listening to Call to Homeschool. If today's episode was helpful, the best way you can support the show is by leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more homeschool moms find this work, and I appreciate it so much.